aware that this session is recorded. You can ask questions at any time already, either in the chat or in the Q&A. Most questions we will cover in the end of the session. But if a question is very relevant for what you will present at that moment, we might cover it straight away as well. Don't feel shy to ask questions. We'll announce the questions. We will repeat the questions verbally, but we'll do that anonymously. So there's no such thing as a silly question. So feel free to submit any questions at any time. This is us. I am here with Rogier Mildenburg. I am Jeroen Smulders, a product manager for the Phenom Perception GSR desktop SEM. That's a whole mouthful, but it's a GSR on a desktop size. I have a background in physics and started about 10 years ago with, well, that's 15 years ago already, with the Phenom. And in 2014, I got involved with the GSR development on the Phenom microscopes. And since then, I've always tried to stay in very close contact with the GSR community and the field of research to make sure that we give you the right answers and the right products. I'd like to give the word to Rogier for a second, so he can introduce himself.
All right, thank you, Jeroen. I am an application specialist for the Phenom XL and the Perception GSR. So I've been working on making GSR a better product and listening to the customers and gather their input to make the product better, to improve GSR analysis. And to make GSR analysis faster, easier, and actually, more reliable than ever.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. I see that the chat, because I understood there was a little bit of an echo on the line.
Gather their input to make the product better, to improve GSR analysis, and to make GSR analysis faster, easier, and actually, more reliable than ever.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. I see that the chat, because I understood there was a little bit of an echo on the line. That's because we are actually in one.
Jeroen, I am an application specialist for the Phenom XL and the Perception GSR. So I've been working on making GSR a better product and listening to the customers and gather their input to make the product better, to improve GSR analysis. And to make GSR analysis faster, easier, and actually, more reliable than ever.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. I see that the chat, because I understood there was a little bit of an echo on the line. That's because we are actually in one room. That tells me that I should mute my phone when the computer is talking. So thanks for that feedback already. This is the agenda for today. We did the introductions already. That doesn't take much time. To give you a quick recap of GSR and the product, we'll keep that as short as possible in about 10 minutes. Because we do assume a little bit that all of you online do know what GSR is and what the general technique of GSR with an electron microscope is. And then to refresh your memories, and for the people that haven't seen the software live, we will do a live demonstration with the software directly on the electron microscope. We'll take about 15 minutes for that, so also fairly compact. And then the major time is to answer any questions. Again, I will remind you, there's no such thing as a silly question, even if you're not familiar with the software. don't hesitate to just ask. So with that, I would say, Rogier, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Jeroen. I will start with a product introduction. I see Jeroen has muted himself, so there's no echo anymore. Yeah, I will just go quickly over what is Phenom Gsr. I think most of you already have been in contact with the product for a short while, but let's still quickly jump over this. So Phenom Gsr is actually the solution we provide for automated gunshot residue analysis. And the Phenom Gsr as a product is just a Phenom XL as you know it, sort of very versatile microscope with fast and high quality imaging, but also it is dedicated for GSR analysis. So the software it comes with is fully dedicated to analyze small GSR particles. So together with that and the Phenom XL, you have the suitability also for other forensic applications like diatoms or checking light bulbs from car accidents or paint analysis, because it's also just a general SCM. That's all possible. So what makes the Phenom XL such a good product for automation? It is mainly, if we have to say one thing, that would be mainly the CEB6 source. So regular SCMs usually have a tungsten source, but they die out after 100 or 150 hours. So our system has a CEB6 source, which means that we have at least 1,500 hours of lifetime. And yeah, so there's no sudden loss of the beam. So after 1,500 hours, the system source slowly degrades, which means that you will never, your source will never break. And that's especially handy when you're doing automated runs of maybe more than a day, so that your source doesn't die out halfway through. So that will never happen with the CEB6 source. And other than that, the system requires very little space, so you can put it on any table, any bench top, and yeah, you can even run it outside working hours. So it's a very suitable tool to automate your analysis. Yeah, so I had a section about GSR, but I think most of you already know what GSR is. So I'll just go straight into how the perception software works, from your sample to how to get from your sample to your report. So this is the perception software that comes with the Phenom XL. And it does automatic particle detection, it acquires images automatically, does EDS automatically, and then classifies it also automatically, and it puts all that information for you in a report. So let me quickly go over how that works. So the only thing that the user needs to put into the software is the sample area. So what area of the sample you want to analyze, either the whole sample or maybe a part of the sample, and provide a recipe saying things like what is the size you want to detect, or do you want to apply a certain limit to your analysis. So that's the input the user needs to give. Other than that, the rest is all automatic. So first it will segment the surfaces, and then it will detect the particles with backscatter contrast. So the background is usually carbon tape, and it's very dark in an SEM image, and the GSR particles are usually very bright because they're made from heavy metals. So they really stand out from the background. So that's how we see our particles. And then the particles that are very bright, they will be analyzed automatically. So the whole area of that bright particle will be analyzed by EDS, and that will give you a spectrum. And that spectrum gives you a quantification. And then that quantification is applied to a certain rule set. So you put the quantification into the rule set, and then it goes to a certain class. And this is also something that the user can define. We hand out standard classifications, which work for most people. But if you really want to modify this to your liking, that's very possible. So then it ends up in a certain class, and that is then eventually what is reported. And then it goes on to the next particle or the next field. So that's how it does the whole automated run. And this whole process, which you see here, happens in a matter of less than 2 seconds. Right, so a little more about the classification. As I said, we provide rule libraries, which have rules for all classes that you can encounter during a GSR analysis. So that's not only the GSR particles that we can detect, but obviously also other particles that we might be interested in, like gold or silver particles or mercury particles. And this can fully be customized by the user. So if a user in their country is really looking for certain particles from a certain ammunition, for example, they can just make a new rule and make a new class to customize that. So this is an example of the report you will eventually get. So it has all the information of what particles we reported. So in this case, we just reported one 3-component particle, as you can see in the top. And then there's all the other stuff that we usually see with GSR, and also some salts, for example. That's also what can be analyzed. So you really get a complete overview of what particles are on your sample. So as we know, according to the standard, also a revisit is necessary. So that is all provided in the software. So you don't need a different software to do the revisiting. So you get your raw results from your report, and you can always load that data set back into the software and revisit those particles. So you can see here that we have different runs, and then we can just click on a particle and click relocate, and we automatically go to that particle and define a spectrum, define an area that we will analyze the spectrum in. So here we see the red box on the right. So we analyze the area EDS, and then we can also define some custom labels there. And then we can save this as a confirmed GSR particle, if it is actually confirmed, of course. And then we can also put this into our report. So I show an example of this here. On the right, we see that the area we analyzed that we revisited, and then also the spectrum there. So if you want to remove labels, for example, if we want to remove the aluminum peak, the labels of the aluminum peak, we can do that. Or maybe add different labels of different peaks if that will be necessary. All right, then there's also the option if you were more oriented towards research, that you really go into depth of what particles you have analyzed. So there's always a big set of parameters that we have from a particle. So it measures, for example, the area or the average diameter, the aspect ratio, all kinds of stuff is in here, and also way more information about the composition. So if you're really interested in one specific particle, or if you want to do larger analysis on your data set, you can also export this to Excel and do everything that you can do with Excel with your data. So it's a very versatile software. That makes it a very versatile software. Okay, so obviously we also do a lot of tests on our Planar sample, and we easily detect the particles of 0.5 micron. So we can actually even go lower than 0.5 micron, but that will obviously slow down your run a little bit. So usually also our customers, they analyze up to 0.5 micron. And we regularly test our systems with a Planar sample, and we easily pass those. And when we also check our results, we can see that we have a very good repositioning as well, because the stage in the Phenom XL is very accurate, up to 7 micron. So also the accuracy of the visiting particles is around 7 micron. So that's why you will never get lost and never lose a particle that you have analyzed with the Phenom GSR. Other than that, so we just launched a new Phenom user interface with the Phenom XL G2, which you see on the left, and this new user interface also comes with the Phenom GSR. So as I said, the Phenom GSR is really an XLG2 now with perception software, and this also adds. This also includes the new user interface for the Phenom GSR, which means that if you are doing regular analysis, you will get a new updated user interface. And this also includes the EDS mapping feature. So if you want to map certain particles that you're interested in, or other samples that you're interested in, then you can do that with the mapping software. All right, I see I got a question already, and that is, what is a plano sample? Okay, let me go back to this slide here. So a planar sample is actually the standard for GSR. Let me say that you know where the particles are and how many and what sizes, and those particles are all a known composition. And that composition is also related to GSR. So usually it's 1/3 lead, 1/3 antimony, and 1/3 barium. So that means if you can analyze a GSR sample or a plano sample, that means that you are theoretically, of course, also able to do GSR analysis on any real sample, because you can detect GSR particles from 0.5 micron and above. So it's just a standard sample to do our test, that we know the positions, and that we can actually check afterwards if we have detected all the particles. I hope that answers your question. I think that was it. Are there any more questions coming in already, Ewan? I see him shaking his head. All right, then I think it's time for the live demo of the software. Let me see. I should switch my screen. Okay, it should be that you can see the perception software at the moment. All right, so let me just, I think I have 15 minutes for this, but let me just give you a quick overview of how we do GSR analysis with this software. So in general, this is your control tab on the top, where we can see this is your workflow basically. So in the image, you define your stage, then you define your recipe, and here in the AFA, this is where you click play and do your analysis. In the GSR tab, here we can revisit particles, and the particle inspector tab is you can also see our Excel worksheet, and this is where we can detect see more parameters of our particles. So this is really your workflow. So you want to start at the image tab, and this is where we define our settings. So we say this is what beam energy we want to use. Of course, we want to use at least 20 kV in this case, and a large spot size to get a good beam. And here we can, on the right, this is our optical image of our stage. And as you can see, I loaded 4 samples in here, 3 GSR samples and 1 plano sample. So I analyzed them last night. Otherwise, this demo would take a little more time. So I can show you the results real quick. So I defined these areas first. So I defined 3 circles and 1 rectangle for the plano. So I can do this with this panel on the right, and also 2 calibration points. So these you would have to set manually. And from this is actually areas we analyze. So that's the user input required. And also in the next step, we can define the recipe. So this is the user input that is required. Other than that, we can obviously just do regular imaging. So when we double click, we move the stage. And we can also do one-click EDS. So when I click on this particle, for example, I can already see a barium antimony particle. We can do EDS. So it's very, very rapid software. It's very easy to use, and it's really focused on analyzing small particles. Here on the right, we have our vector file. So this is where we define what elements we are interested in. So now I loaded a general Gsr vector file, giving me all the elements that we are generally interested in when doing Gsr. But this is all customizable if you want to, for example, detect magnesium, or if you want to detect platinum in your sample. That's all possible. All right, let's go to the recipe. So this is where we define what steps it should take. And there's many possibilities here, but of course there's a standard recipe that works for most samples, and then there's the customization. So this whole software is really built on when you do repeated analysis, it's very easy. You can just load in the same recipe and click play. Maybe change your areas a little bit, and then within 5 minutes you're good to go. But the software also provides endless customizability, basically. So it's really whatever side you're on, it's both possible. So if you want to do some more research-like analysis, you can do that. But if you just want to do general analysis and want to get your results as soon as possible, then the software is also very suitable for that. So to quickly go over the recipe, it's divided in 4 sections. So it's the startup phase, then there's the run every time, data runs, and the shutdown. So the startup is what it does once before you do your whole analysis. So here I just calibrate my EDX very quickly. And this is the steps it does every time after a stub. So say we've have analyzed our first GSR stub, then it will go through these steps again. So that's just a quality control, see if our EDS results are still okay. And then there's the auto video, which then calibrates your brightness and contrast levels again. So that all your runs have the same thresholds. All right, and then the data runs, this is really where we define, okay, what areas are we going to do? So in the image, this is where we define these 4 areas, and we don't have to do them all. We can also say we want to do only the first one, or we can say, okay, we want to do the first one twice, or 3 times, or 4 times. So that's the customizability you have. So we define what stub we want to analyze. And this is also where we define, okay, what size of particles do we want to detect. There's a lot of possibilities here on how to do that. So I will not go into this right now. But for example, we can say we can do a cutoff for morphology. And we can say we want to analyze at a certain magnification. So this all determines what size of particles you can eventually detect. All right, and yeah, to make a recipe, it's just click and drag. So now in the shutdown section, this is what we do after everything is done. We can, for example, say, all right, let the system go to standby or to sleep, and it's just click and drag. So if we want to make a new area, we just pull it in here, and then we say, okay, let's do GSR step 1 for another time. So it's that's very convenient, as you can just click and drag and see immediately what your system is going to do. All right, so when we define all this, then we can say we go to the AFA. So this is the automated feature analysis, and this is the run I completed yesterday night. So we can see that the quality control all passed, and these are the results from each stub. So this is your first quick overview of what your run did. And of course here on the left it says that they all completed. If we want to start a new one, we can just say run alpha analysis, and then it will go again. In the run properties, you can define per run certain properties. So if you want to give it a number or apply a certain sample group, give a general description, that's what you can do here per stub. And this will then be transferred to your report. Okay. Let me see. This is a sorry. This is a Gsr panel, and as you can see, this is the map we have of our particles. So if we zoom in a little bit, we can see all the particles that we detected for each sample. So here, this is actually a large round stub, but I put a limit on here of 1,000 particles, so that's why they're all clustered in here. It was quite a full stub. Same for this one here. We analyzed the whole stub, also pretty dense. And this is our Planar sample. So now if we want to revisit a particle, we can go through the list here. Reset this. So here we have our 4 runs, and say I want to analyze a particle from run 2. And here you can already, on the bottom, you can already see a preview of your particle and of your spectrum. See, you can just click through the particles, see what's interesting. See a lot of broken up particles. Now let me try to relocate this one. As you can see on the right here, we relocated our particle, so it's somewhere, we can see this red circle here on the map. We can see where it is, so it's this one. So now what we can do is, when we have EDS selected, we can define an area, like this. And then it will, again, this one. So the yellow spectrum is the spectrum we analyzed during the run. So that is now overlaid with the spectrum we are analyzing right now. So that then you can see if that is about the same. And then indeed we can see that we have a lead, barium, antimony particle with sulfur, which is also a very common element in these particles. The spectrum is about the same as we analyzed during the run. So we can say, all right, this is a Gsr particle, and then we can click Save. And we can see that a green check will apply here. Now say, let me see, yes, so I have manual spectral labeling enabled, and say, okay, we want to define certain labels in this one. Let me go to another particle to show you the difference. So I do analysis again. So in the background we have the same, the yellow spectrum that was collected during the automated run. And then I want to apply certain labels. So say I want to, I don't want to show silicon. I don't want to show sulfur, just the 3 top elements. Then I can do that. And I can press Save, and it will only show me these elements instead of the other ones that we're maybe not interested in. What we then do is click Report, and that will give us either a PDF report or a Word report. See, I don't think you can see. Let me see. Yeah, all right, now you can see it. So we can quickly go through our report and check our, so these are the particles we revisited. And here, this is the particle we detected, the first one. So we can see the image acquired during our revisited analysis. We can see the spectrum that was then acquired with all the labels and some parameters of your particle. So your average diameter, the size, the position on the sample, the class it was put in during the automated analysis, all that kind of stuff. Also in the next one, you can see we also customize our labels. So we only have barium, antimony, and lead labels. And here for the next run, this is your report of your Planar sample. So we can see we analyzed 166 particles, which is around the number that we would expect during a Planar run. So that always also went well. So that's also what you can do. You can always do a Planar run while you do other runs and check if those results come out fine. Okay, and then just quickly the particle inspector. So this is the whole list of one run. So we can see the particle map here, and yeah, you can just go through all the particles, their composition. Yeah, it's just an endless amount of parameters that you can see from your particles. If you really want to go in depth, and then this would be really the way to go. All right, that's already half an hour from when we started, so I'm looking to Jeroen. Is it time to do the Q&A? All right, he's nodding his head, so I think that's a yes.
Yes, I'll be sparse with muting myself. We did indeed get some questions submitted already. One of the last questions I saw coming in is, does the forensic researcher need to revisit all samples? How does the forensic process work? That might actually be one for me, at least to partially answer. For most countries, so it varies a little bit country by country what the exact procedure is to what the forensic researcher has to revisit and has to confirm. Generally speaking, most countries follow that they revisit a certain number of particles. So after an automatic run is finished and they find, for example, 20 positive particles, they revisit, for example, 10, and with those 10 revisited particles, they generate a report. So that's more or less what most countries follows, but this does vary depending on what the local court expects from the reporting of the GSR. Then we had a question coming in a little bit earlier. How long did it take to run those 4 samples? So we showed in the samples on the screen that we run this night. So the question was, here, how long did that take to run?
That's a very good question. Let me see. So here it says the elapsed time. So this is 7.5 hours. These are I put samples in, or the recipe was pretty accurate, so I wanted to detect the smallest particles possible to get a good accurate result. So that's why it took 7.5 hours, which is okay. I think we detected a few thousands of particles. So for example, this run, we detected already 8,000 particles. And in my recipe, I put, I think, a 3-second EDS on the particles. So if you count that up, then it's quite normal that it would take 7.5 hours. So yeah, it really depends on the time, really depends on how accurate you want your results to be or what kind of particles you want to detect. So if you want to detect 0.5 micron particles, your run obviously will take longer. So that's what I did in this run. If you say, okay, I only want to detect particles of 1 micron, and then you can already lower your properties of your run. So you can do it at a lower magnification or lower resolution. That will save a lot of time. And then maybe this run could have been done in 2 hours. If you say, okay, I want to detect even smaller particles, or I want to make sure that I detect every single one, then you can easily also make it 10 hours. It really depends on what your wishes are. Do you have a lot of samples, or do you only analyze a sample once every week? So yeah, it really depends on what settings you have. But this run took 7.5 hours.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I think that's a very good example of a problem with quite a lot of particles. Similarly to that, I see a question, how long did the Plano run take to cover 100% of these particles specifically on the Plano sample?
"25 minutes." So that's.
I was going to say, I didn't hear your microphone for seconds, but.
Okay, no, that's also in the report. So we can see here that the analyst time was 25 minutes, and this is all the GSR particles. I think we should detect 165 or a little more, if I'm correct, for the sample we put in. So we detected all the particles, and it took us 25 minutes. I think that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. I think that makes it quite concrete on the questions on speed versus accuracy. It's always difficult to explain, probably, but I think these are some good examples. A completely different question: does the Phenom XL have variable pressure?
Yes, it does. Let me see. I think I quickly glanced over this, but if we look here in the beginning, so after we define our beam energy and our spot size, we can also define our vacuum. And in most cases, especially for GSR, we really want to run in high vacuum. That gives us more counts and a higher resolution. So that gives us better particle images, because if you put air in a chamber, you will obviously get more noise. It can be, in certain cases, if you, for example, have a lot of hairs on your sample or maybe some fabric, that you want to go to lower vacuum. So that is possible, because the fabric or the hairs, they will charge and they will become very bright under the SEM, and that will really give you distorted results, because of course when you have bright particles, your SEM will start to analyze that and it will give you only carbon back. And then we're not interested in that. So in that case, you might want to consider going to medium or low vacuum. But there are 3 settings that the XL has. So that's this one is 0.1 Pascal, that's the highest, and they can go to 10 or 60 Pascal.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question on the Plano. If we have a, let's say, pre-prepared recipe for that, or that you have to make that each time that you run the Plano separately?
Let me go to the recipe builder for that. So this is the recipe I use to analyze the Plano sample, and this is indeed just a standard thing I always do, because I analyze Plano samples quite a lot, and I always use the same settings also to check the performance of the system over time. And this is also something that is supplied with the Phenom GSR. So it's nothing special. It's indeed just a standard recipe. You can always just copy that into any other recipes you want to do. It's not something you have to set up each time before you do an analysis. The only thing you have to set up is to define the area. That's the only thing.
That's actually, it is as if you are reading questions as well here, because that's one of the next questions. And I'll combine these two in one from different people. So, is there a limit in the size? Because I think somebody saw that you had a little square area for the Plano, so it's clear that we can do round and square areas. But is there any limit in size of the areas? And a question that is probably related to that is if there's any limit in particles that we can take to detect. So probably, for example, if you define a large area, is there any limit to that?
Thank you, Jeroen. So the smallest area we can define is obviously one field. So we cannot define an area smaller than one field, and that's what we define here, saying here we go to 200 magnification. So the smallest field that we will analyze will be an image of 200 magnification. There's no and yeah, we can always go bigger than that. So when we go to larger areas, which is I think most people want to do, there is no limit for that other than your physical limits of your sample holder, obviously. So you could analyze an area 10 by 10 centimeters, although that's quite large. And there is also no limit for the amount of particles we can detect in that run. So we can define a limit ourselves if we want to, but generally there is no limit of the amount of particles we can see during a run. Also, if we do a run of multiple days of 36 or 30 samples in our system, it doesn't really matter how much particles are on there. The only thing that matters is that it might take a while if you're analyzing hundreds of thousands of particles, but in general, the system shouldn't have any problems with that.
Okay, thank you. I think that explains that quite well. Then there's a question. You explained the difference between EB6 and the tungsten. I think that is clear to the viewers. We got a question was submitted. Would a field emission give an even better or faster result? If you can answer that.
So a field emission system would obviously have a higher resolution, but as we are detecting particles of up to half a micron, I don't think that resolution will actually give you an added benefit in analyzing these type of GSR particles. Maybe if you want to go even smaller than that, which is I haven't heard that from a lot of customers. So if our samples are half a micron large, you can either have a resolution of 1 nanometer or 5 nanometers, but there's not a big difference there for the eventual quality of your GSR results. If you want to make a beautiful picture of your GSR particle at a very high resolution or very high magnification, then you might need an FEG system. But other than that, it's mostly the price that is different. So yeah, of course you can do GSR analysis with an FEG system, but those are, as far as I know, usually a lot more expensive than CEB6 systems. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll have to scroll up a little bit to see if there's any questions out so far. Yeah, here's actually one which is also related somewhat to the source, and that is if the customer can exchange the source themselves.
So this source is indeed the CEB6 source, and the customer usually, in most cases, I wouldn't recommend to change this source yourself. That's because the main reason is that this source only needs to be replaced maybe once every year. It depends on how much you use your system. So this source goes for 1,500 hours and maybe even to 2,500 hours. And that means that you can actually plan your service action. So usually the service might come once a year, and if you use your system a lot, they can also replace the source themselves because it needs to happen in a very clean manner. So the source, I wouldn't recommend it to replace it yourself, but it is because we have a CEB6 source, it is possible to schedule this source replacement in, say, let's do it in 2 months. If you see your source quality is degrading a little bit, then you can just schedule the source replacement. You will never have no image.
Okay, thank you. That gives a clear image of what people can expect from the source, I think. I have 2 more questions here that are also maybe somewhat related. One person asks, how about non-tox ammunition, if we can also detect that? And I have another question coming from that actually doesn't do GSR, but detects other particles, metal particles on a filter type, and if we can do that as well. I'm not sure if that can be covered with one answer, but those two I thought might be related.
All right, thank you, Jeroen. I think I'll go first into the non-toxic question. So, as I said, we will detect. We can detect any particle that is brighter than the background. So also non-toxic ammunition. The only thing you would have to do, I think I already put classes in that. Let me see if I can show this to you. So I have some classes in here, and I also put these classes. So these are also non-toxic ammunition, and it's just a matter of, so this is the rule file, so this goes from top to bottom, and you can just add a class for non-toxic ammunition saying what their composition should be. So for any type of ammunition, we can add these classes. Maybe you would have to adjust your thresholds a little bit, because the lead particles might be a lot brighter than your titanium or copper tin particles. But yeah, it's very possible to detect non-toxic ammunition. Yeah. Right, and the other question was about from a non-GSR customer. Let me see. So they want to classify small metal particles on a filter. Well, that's actually an application that we usually do with another type of system that detect metal particles on filters, and it's the same principle. So they also have a dark filter on the SEM image and bright particles on the foreground. So it's the same principle, but it's a different application. So this software I'm showing you now is really dedicated for GSR. So the whole workflow is designed around GSR, but for the application you were talking about, that's really a particle X application. So you could also do it with this, but the application you're talking about is we have also different software packages for that that do clean check, for example. So technical cleanliness for the automotive industry, we have other software packages for that. But it's the same principle in detecting GSR particles with your backscatter contrast and doing EDS on them. It's the same thing. Oh.
Okay, well, I guess that's good to know. So the short answer is yes, but with a slightly different software package. I can share some links to that directly after the session to you directly, so that you get the right information. I'm scrolling through again. Let's see. A few more small questions that will. Yeah, I think we covered mostly. If the system can run unattended overnight, well, yeah, yes. Sorry, looking to cover that question directly. That's what we did actually this night. So that is what we actually do all the time. And one more, how important is the EDS count rate for the analysis speed?
I can quickly go into that. You actually want the most counts as possible, so that's also why we use a larger spot size. So our spot size, we make it nice and large, so we get a lot of counts, but that also gives us a lower resolution. But as already said, resolution in this case is not as important. What is more important is the counts you get from your analysis. So the more counts you have, the faster you get a nice spectrum where you can really identify the peaks. So in this analysis, for example, here we can define the minimum times, but also the minimum counts and your target counts you want to get from your spectrum. So you can define anything here, but you can imagine if you have more counts per second, then you also get to that target count quicker. So that means your analysis will be much faster in the end. So yes, counts per second, so your count rate is important. And we want to make that as high as possible. Obviously, not making your resolution really bad. So yeah, we always want to find some middle ground there. But yes, your count rate is important.
Okay, I think we're reaching close to the time. I saw one very specific question still coming in. I think you might be able to answer that still. Mentioned that a stub can be analyzed 3 times in a row. That you already mentioned during the presentation. But the question is, can it also be run 3 times with different contrast settings? So that, for example, you run it maybe with much higher and higher contrast to detect one time more particles than the previous time.
All right, thank you. So let me see how I can demonstrate that easily. So here we define all our runs we want to do, and indeed, as I said, we can analyze the same stub multiple times. So if we're for example just starting with GSR with this system, we can maybe take a stub that we know well and see what results we get with different analysis settings. So what we can do is not just changing the contrast and the brightness we analyze at, but what I would do instead of that is actually change the detection settings. So in your detection settings, this is actually where you define what brightness. So it will take an image and look at the brightness of the pixels, and you can define here at what video level value you want to analyze your particles. So what you can do is set up different values for different runs here. So now they're all at 160 and 140. But we can say, okay, we want to put some higher and some lower to see. So when you put them lower, so the lower video level will, of course, detect more particles. So when I do it like this, you can see that these particles, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, it might be difficult, but you can see that these particles also become green, and that means they will also be detected during the run. So when we put them lower, we will detect more particles. When we put them higher, we will skip more particles. So that this is a way where you can really define that you skip a lot of particles that you're not interested in, because for example maybe aluminum particles, we're not interested in that, and aluminum has a lower brightness, so we say okay, we detect above a certain threshold. But of course you can play with that, and if you quickly want to see what that does with your results, you can indeed just do the same stub 3 times and maybe even set a certain threshold. So say you can say analyze 100 fields. So you don't have to do the whole thing, and then you can compare the analysis for all 3 to see what the difference is in results.
Okay, thank you. I think that was pretty clear. Also think we covered most of the questions. There may be 1 or 2 here and there that I've missed, but we have run out of time. If I do read back and we do find any questions that we didn't see or forgot to answer, we will get back to you directly by email after the session. So for now, I think I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Rogier, for the demonstration and answering all the questions. I'm quite happy to see that participants were quite active and submitted the questions this morning. For those of you who want to join the afternoon session as well, you're most welcome. It will cover the same topic and mostly the same content, but there might be different questions at that time. So for now, I would like to thank you and have a very good day.